It is an election day episode of Chris and Company, and I just noticed me wearing red, not saying who I voted for, but is not necessarily a reflection of the political party that I affiliate with. This is a total coincidence. We're not going to be talking about the election much on here at all. In fact, we aren't going to whatsoever. We have an interview with Graham Couch, which I'm really looking forward to. But if you are listening to this on Wednesday, November 6th, which is the day after the election, I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that we don't know who the president is yet. Now, let me take that back. We know who the president is. It's Joe Biden, in theory. The president-elect, we are unsure of. We will have a new president-elect at some point soon. Last election during COVID, it took like 4 days. It was Saturday, right before a noon kickoff between Michigan and Indiana, in which those things aren't related, I just remember. But ironically, Michigan's playing Indiana this weekend. So, you see, it's when you sit down and you make those connections, it really brings people together. But we have a fun interview coming up with a friend of the program, and not just friend of the program in name only. Graham Couch is somebody that I've been reading for a long time. It's somebody that I've known for a long time. I would call him, and I think he's even bragged about this, as well as he should, an OG Castellani supporter. Always been in my corner. Really appreciate everything that the guy has done for me. And I'm excited to talk to him about Michigan State athletics. I mean, Graham, time really flies. And I don't know if he's going to be happy to hear this, but Graham has now kind of seen a real evolution of Michigan State athletics. And I do want to talk about that, kind of starting with the end of the D'Antonio era. We find ourselves with Jonathan Smith now in East Lansing. And of course, I want to discuss the future of the Tom Izzo era as well, which the new season kicked off last night. They beat Monmouth. Michigan beat Cleveland State as well. We're going to try to get some Michigan basketball people on here at some point. But before we get to the interview, I just want to throw out the fixings. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014, the link tree, everything, all my content you can find down below. And I think by Wednesday, we will have debuted a new site. That is CastellaniContent.com. The link to that will be in the description for this video. There will be blogs featured on CastellaniContent.com, but the main purpose of this website is it's a one-stop shop for all things that I do. I get a lot of tweets from people or DMs saying, hey, can you go back and find this video that you did? Or can you get this episode of this show? And often I can. It takes a lot of searching. What this will be starting now is a full archive of everything that I do, labeled. We're talking Michigan football, basketball, Tiger videos going forward, vlogs on YouTube, movie reviews, and of course, episodes of Chris and Company. And I'll say this, everything you want. If you are one of those people that likes me, which there are still several, every bit of Chris Castellani content you can find very easily. The website looks beautiful. I wish I could say that I was smart enough to say that I designed it, but I didn't. It looks great. You can go to that. I will be plugging that a lot here in the future, so you can check all that stuff out. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. We will be back to wrap this thing up, but let's get to our interview with Graham Couch. Chris Company rolls on with, as I said, friend of the program, but not just in name only. This is one of the few instances of somebody that I've actually known being on the show and not just hopping on the bandwagon of friend of the program. I've known Graham for off and on for 9 years. Was I think the first time that we interacted was the summer 2015 with when I was still interning with the great Jack Ebling. So always making time. I appreciate it. Graham, what's going on with you, man? How you doing?
No, grateful to be here. I've gotten a lot of pleasure and pain out of your Tigers videos over the years, and have followed your career and real proud of the work you've done, man. And happy to do this. And apologize to the listeners if I wipe my face occasionally. I tried to squeeze in a workout, but being the large oaf I am, the shower didn't exactly take yet. So that'll be
well. This isn't election day. This isn't election day. So you're actually just paying homage to Nixon in that one debate when he went against JFK. Yeah. But obviously, you're a columnist for the LSJ, been covering Michigan State for a long time, and I think that you're at a point now where we've seen you've witnessed and covered kind of the evolution of Michigan State sports. And I want to start with the football program because you were around and during the heyday of the D'Antonio era. And I do think, and I believe you'll agree with me on this, that there was kind of this misconception to a certain extent that the program had this really short window that was great and then totally fell off. That's not necessarily true, where there was about a decade of legitimate stability there. I mean, in 2017, they had a 10-win team. And then immediately it felt like right around 18, 19, it just became somewhat stagnant. I guess from your perspective of things, as someone who covered a guy who is the greatest coach in Michigan State football history, I mean, took them to new heights. Were you surprised at how quickly things went sour for him and just the fan base's perception?
It didn't feel quick at the time I was covering it because it felt like it was 4 years, and then it feels like they're still in it to some degree of no, the line of scrimmage play and all that. 3-9 surprised me in 2016. I didn't see that coming. In hindsight, there were lots of reasons that happened, but I did not see it coming. And then them trying, like, you can see why it happened to some degree. I think sometimes as a staff that builds something like that, you only have so much time where you are hungry and young, and and I just think they lost some steam at the end. And then when things didn't work out, I think they were a little bit broken by it. Like that 2016 class they tried to put together, that was their attempt to elevate it and sustain it and take it to the level that where Clemson and Alabama were at the time and things like that. And it didn't work for, some of it their fault, some of it bad circumstances. So, but it's a reminder that a lot of these things don't end well. And when you see something that's sustained and does end well, that is really remarkable. What Nick Saban did at Alabama, just remarkable. Like, that's hard, very hard to do. Even Izzo has not had the greatest last 3 or 4 years. The 30 years he's had, it's remarkable, the sustainability and the level, and with different groups. So no, there's no question that it surprised me a little bit the way it happened, but that it happened, I guess you knew it probably wouldn't live forever.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways there's parallels to a certain extent with what Michigan's going through right now, where because of the Saban era at Bama, we've taken for granted this idea that, like, sustainability, it's not that it's easy, but that it's possible. Like, we're talking about the greatest coach ever who did that over really about a 15-year stretch where college football ran through Alabama. When you look at some of the great teams of recent memory, I mean, LSU had an immaculate season, then fell off right away. USC had a short run, then fell off pretty quickly, and still hasn't really gotten back there. I think that you learn after you have that kind of success how difficult it is to sustain it. But at the same time, there's still, like I said, about a 10-year window of success and a 3-year window, which they were a top 5 program in the country. And, even though it's only been 5 years since D'Antonio left, I feel like the landscape of college sports, especially college football, has changed so drastically. Do you think with NIL, with the portal being what it is, with conference expansion being what it is, that whether it's with Jonathan Smith or not, that Michigan State football has the resources and the people inside the program capable of sustaining another 3-4 year window in which they are a top 5 program in the country?
It's a good question. I mean, once you've done it once, you've sort of proven it can be done, right? But it is different now. You've got to do it. You've got to have the donors willing to spend that sort of money. You've got to have the infrastructure to bring people in. And the thing, it's going to change again next year when a lot of this stuff's being paid out in-house, right? When you're looking at $20 to $25 million coming from the athletic department, I would guess 12 to more than that, even 15 winds up in football, so that, like, it's going to change again, and we'll see it where MSU is ready. I mean, they have old money. They have the donors. One of the things Michigan State, though, does not have, and this is good for MSU in some ways and bad in others, is they don't have this ache for football the way some places do. And I don't mean that. Like, a lot of people are frustrated right now, and they're not happy. But they have basketball in a way that a lot of people don't, and they care about basketball. It's not just being good at basketball. Lots of places get good. Like, Florida basketball was the best in the country for 2 years, 17 years ago. Nobody there cared, right? So that's it's different. And so one of the problems Michigan State has in terms of demanding excellence from the lowest fan to the highest donor is that there is a level of, it's November, okay, it's basketball season. I think it's a hard thing to do both and care about both at the level where, if you're at Georgia, and something goes wrong with football, 24/7, 365, that is all you're thinking about, fixing that at Georgia. So I think that is one of the challenges they face. Michigan State is not ever going to be one of the top halves of Ohio State. Michigan's always going to have certain advantages, and obviously Oregon, will see what happens post Phil Knight, but some of the top SEC schools, but they're one of the top 30 programs, and they're probably in this new day and age. If you get some momentum, it'll be very interesting once the 12-team playoff takes hold. If you're able to be where MSU was for a while again, if you're able to be where Penn State has been, for example, like Penn State has come up short time and time again, but they would have made the 12-team playoff almost every one of those years.
Right.
And how would have that changed their program trajectory? What if they had a year where they got hot in the playoff? And to answer your question, I don't know. The dynamics are different, but once it's done once, as unlikely as it is, it can be done.
Do you think it's harder to sustain it now than it was 2013 to 2015 when D'Antonio was rolling?
Yeah, it's hard to sustain anything. I think you see that at Florida State this year because so many people are relying on the portal, and culture is an overused word sometimes, but there is something to sweat equity and biding your time and understanding what makes a program. And I think that that's just hard to do with new players year after year and not having underlings who have been waiting their turn, who are ready to step in. I think it's just going to be harder for every program now to sustain it. Now, the question is, can you get the stability of one staff for a long time? And can you have, enough 8-win seasons, that every once in a while you've got 10, 12-win seasons. And but it's going to be harder. It'll be harder than it was before, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially, there's a question I'm going to ask later about a current player on Michigan State's roster who I feel like there's an element about his future that isn't being talked about enough. We'll get to that. And I do want to talk about the Jonathan Smith era, but just real quick, I wanted to ask one question about the lightning rod probably isn't the right word, but just the crazy hurricane that was the Mel Tucker era in the way that the kind of rise and fall of it. And I guess, obviously it ended in a very ugly way, in a very unceremonious way, understandably so. But from many people that I knew within the program, whether they were media based or not, there was kind of a general belief right around 2022, but especially in the early part of 2023, that offseason, that things were not trending upward. But people forget, post 2021, he's toast of the town, 10-year extension. They 11-2. They get a transcendent season from Kenneth Walker. What was your first indicator, as somebody who was kind of behind the scenes there, that the honeymoon wasn't going to last particularly long?
Yeah, part of it was how 2022 was handled. Mm-hmm. But, I still thought he had recruited pretty well, right? And he had a number of 4-star kids and a couple good classes, and those guys were young guys in the program, right? Not really in their performance years yet in terms of how you looked at juniors, seniors. But I certainly had less faith in it as time went on. In 2023, I sat down with him just before the season, and he was upset. He was clearly frustrated with the lack of, NIL understanding at certain components of their ability to really elevate the program and make it be like I think for him, he wanted it to be like an LSU and Ohio State, and he was going to make an attempt at that. And you know what? There are parts of me that think in 2017, if he had come in before NIL, because what you don't need anymore is somebody with swagger, right? You just don't. What you need is stability. You need somebody who people trust, and then you also need money. You need resources. You don't need swagger. You don't need to be doing, have Lamborghinis in a photo shoot anymore during the visit. You need to actually provide them a Lamborghini on their first day on campus. It's a very different world, right? So yeah. And Tucker had swagger to him, and so maybe if say that D'Antonio steps down in 2017 and Tucker were to somehow be the guy then, and that, maybe that situation works for him. I think the world changed under his feet a little bit. MSU was a little slow to the draw in certain ways. They were on the forefront in others. I mean, the Kenneth Walker year is a year where they were on the forefront of the transfer portal. They were out front there. But the NIL world hadn't quite caught up to it yet. And they underestimated how much money they needed in NIL. So some of it was a painful transition that was probably going to happen for any coach who was there at the time. I still don't know 100% if he doesn't get fired, what does the rest of last year look like? They're probably a bowl team. It's not quite as bad. If Sam Levitt is still your quarterback, who is a fantastic young quarterback at Arizona State, if he's the guy, and what does this year look like? Like I don't know entirely that it was going to fall apart. I mean, but there were elements that it had lost steam, I would say, and really when I sat down with him before the 2023 season, a couple weeks before everything hit the fan, I had just a vibe that he was not. He did not sound like he was in the place he was a year before.
Yeah, and I think so much of that, and I think you're right. I don't believe that it was falling apart in the way that they were all of a sudden going to be turned 4-8 seasons. But I do think, and this is just natural with coaches and athletes, the expectations nationally had greatly changed because of the contract. That became a national news thing. And that happens with players. They get extensions all of a sudden. They might be putting up the same numbers, but it doesn't matter because they're not living up to the standards of the money that they're being paid. And I think, you have to learn this. This is a hard lesson to learn as a coach, is that just having success doesn't equal sustainability sometimes. And I think that there was probably some frustration with the fact that maybe the NIL, like you said, the NIL money, the recruiting money wasn't coming in after what was admittedly a really incredible season in 2021. But Michigan State turns the page. Jonathan Smith's there now, and Michigan State finds themselves on the precipice trying to get bowl eligible here. But I want to go back just a few weeks to the Michigan game and Jonathan Smith's first foray into the Michigan State rivalry, because I find a lot of the reactions to be interesting, and one of the popular ones, and this, I feel like this was inevitable, with him potentially losing his first game to Michigan, is almost a self-admitted lack of understanding of the rivalry to a certain extent, and that he was talking about, was going back and watching videos, and even after the first game, he said, we're not going to forget Saturday night, where I'm much more familiar with this. Do you think in your mind how somebody feels about the Michigan State rivalry coming into a regime how much do you think that matters? Do you think that it's important that they have some sort of predetermined history or some sort of notion of what the rivalry is, or do you think that it's a little bit overblown?
I don't think it affected whether they won or lost that game.
I agree. Yes.
They had a great start. They got out coached in the second half. A lot of things went wrong that way. But I do believe it helps you with the fan base significantly, and it helps your life, because you have the thing D'Antonio did brilliantly, after the Michael Hart little brother comment, was he met people where they were, right? He spoke the language of frustration, of that just how long that had built up. That feeling, the reason little brother stuck and the reason it hurt was because it was true. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't that if Michael Hart gets up there and says, something that is way wacky and doesn't make any sense, nobody cares. He said something that actually, I think, struck a nerve, and D'Antonio read that, and he knew where people were at this, and he had been at Michigan State before. He then coached at Ohio State. Like, he understood the dynamics there a little bit. And I do think Jonathan Smith did not. And I remember even telling him that, I met with him before the season, and off the record, we were just kind of bantering back and forth, and he was asking me about restaurants in the area and other things like that. And he said, any advice? And I just said, win your share of the Michigan games, because that's going to determine the mood of so much, and then to not. So when you sort of admittedly don't seem to understand it, not that he doesn't understand rivalries. He came from Oregon State, right, which was and they were on sort of the less resources side of that, or the less, but everything is different. And I do think the level of the vitriol and just how toxic it's become is something that caught him off guard and caught some other players off guard, and you have to experience, and he'll be better for it in the future. He's not built like D'Antonio was, though, where it's this. D'Antonio didn't mind getting surly, and and he was great with those one-liners, and he was. I mean, he became amazing. I mean, D'Antonio's one-liners about the Michigan State rivalry as time went on and he had the team to win that game were just incredible. I mean, he was so good at that. He was more entertaining and a better wit with that than anything else he did. And so the question will be, how, what does next year look like when your athletic director, your entire fan base, your team desperately needs to win one of these now, and you understand that. And so how does your tenor change?
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways people were spoiled because the intensity that D'Antonio brought to that rivalry was something that really no other Michigan State coach had brought to that prior to that. I mean, there have been guys who tried to beat Michigan, tried to beat him consistently, but the way that he did it and the way that he using the rhetoric and the one-liners and ultimately the number one equalizer, which is he won the game. I mean, whether you view a guy as intense about the rivalry or not, that's the way where I kind of feel bad for Jonathan Smith, because if they win that game 24-17, no one's talking about lack of intensity to the game. It's just the fact that they fell apart a little bit in the second half. They got out coached in the second half, and now it's just an added bonus of, oh, well, maybe he doesn't understand the rivalry.
Yeah, if he won 6 in a row and it's like, it's just another game, that would be the worst dig ever.
Right.
That would be incredible smack talk. Like, it would be like, and one thing, we're getting a sewer project done around our house that was supposed to start at some point, and they chose right at the beginning of this interview to start trimming trees. So if you hear occasional buzzing or something like that,
okay,
that's what that is. I apologize. It's the city of Lansing with our taxes at work.
We're good on my end. I'm not hearing anything
Okay.
right now, but this is 3 different regimes now that you've covered in football, and 3 wildly different personalities. This is just the impression I've gotten. I could be wrong. Have you found Jonathan Smith to be easier? Might not be the right word, but just as a personality, a little bit more giving in terms of what he gives to the media compared to the very kind of quiet nature at points of the Tucker and D'Antonio regimes?
He gives more than Tucker did. Tucker was now, if you had Tucker one-on-one, he was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, like he did, it was very purposeful, and that was often my frustration with him in press conferences, and led to a couple of our little headbutting. But because and I get it, he comes from the Saban school, but Saban has a wit to him, has a way.
Yeah.
It works a little better, and he wins. And there are times when, too, like Antonio, I never thought was ever better than during the 3-9 season 2016. He seemed to understand that, like, this isn't going well. I get that. You're going to have questions about it, and I'm better off if I sort of explain to you what's happening. And And Jonathan Smith, to this point, has been pretty good. I think in it doesn't give you a ton, but he doesn't BS you either, I don't think, and that's I think appreciated. He talks in very short sentences. Like it's very easy to transcribe. His press conferences are like half the length of anybody else I've covered. It's like 1/4 the length of Izzo has single quotes that are longer than his entire press conferences, and sometimes his answers are so short that you haven't even really had time to process a follow-up. And what, I think it's been a change for all of us that he sort of gives you the answer, and that's that. And sometimes he speaks in Yoda terms where he speaks the sentence backwards and things like that. That's kind of fun too. But yeah, no, it's certainly different. I've enjoyed the change of pace for sure.
Do you learn more about a program covering them when they're 3-9 or more when they're 13-1?
You learn both, because you learn about human behavior in those situations, and how boastful people are, how humble they are, and how contentious they are. And you learn a little bit about, like, I think covering a college beat in those situations is more difficult than some other things, because some of the the fan base is so intense. And the coaches feel that, right? They feel when they're struggling, they feel that coming down on them a little bit, and they feel sort of a sense of negativity, and that spills over differently. And you also have more people covering the team who are personally fans of the team and are part of the people who are hurt and want to see things turn around, and so that changes the tone sometimes a little bit, where you don't have that really in pro sports if you're covering the Lions or Pistons or anything like Tigers, anything like that. So it's a different dynamic, but I think you learn both equally. I really do. And I enjoy, like I said on, I think I said it on Ebling's show, maybe back when about the time you were interning.
I think I know what you're going to say here, but go ahead.
I was a little tired of Michigan State winning.
Yes.
They were going, and I had said, I made the comment that I would appreciate. I either predicted or made the comment that I would appreciate just the 3-9 season.
Yes, that's what it was.
Went 3-9 immediately after it. I had no idea that was coming. I just said just once, and part of it wasn't even that I needed them to lose. I just needed some changeover. They've been the same guys they've been winning with a lot too. It is any new storylines. People had stopped having fun with, the small victories. It stopped bringing any joy to anybody. It was, but I did not expect that, and I did not expect the downturn that happened.
Yeah, I don't think it's healthy to win all the time the same way that I don't think it's healthy to lose all the time. I think you need to have some ebbs and flows. Like, could I have done without, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 of those Tiger seasons in between 2014? Yes, but like it made getting to the playoffs this year a lot of fun. So it's in some ways.
You could have cut that at least in half. It would have been nice.
I could have done without 2019 just as a whole. I mean, we do without. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of fat that we could have trimmed out of that era and still gotten to the same place. But the sport as a whole, just with conference expansion and NIL, has changed so much. I mean, you cover the team, but I know you are a fan of the sport, and with us now almost one season into what is essentially the new college football, do you still have concerns about what the future of the sport has in store? Oh
yeah, for sure. For a number of reasons on a number of fronts. I mean, I think they've put so many, I like how long games take with the number of breaks, because I'm writing a running quick takes column that needs timeouts. I need injuries. I need timeouts. I need delays to get it done. When I just watch a college football game as a fan, I am annoyed by 3 incomplete passes, 4-minute commercial. I think they've gotten to the point with that where it's just, I don't think it's a good entertainment product. And I think when you couple a lot of things together where certain programs aren't going to have hope at a certain point, when there's just not, when the NIL is what it is, and only so many teams really have a chance, will there be a large enough audience to sustain it? Will people be turned off in time as it becomes more and more pro sports, as schools cut sports? It's not going to happen all at once, because one of the things that is going to help is the expanded playoff. Like this year, I'm so looking forward to that. Like, I think that's going to be wildly fun. And so that is going to kind of balance it. And you won't be able to see any data and loss of eyeballs or anything. But, 10 years from now, is there a downturn because people are a little turned off by a number of things? It's not as entertaining. It's not, it's not packaged as well. The athletes don't have the same connection with the campus that they used to have. The game times aren't as friendly to fans who want to go. All those sort of things can add up. And so, I am concerned about it overall. I mean, I still love watching it.
Yeah.
But I don't love watching it like I used to. It's not my number one anymore. It's neither is college basketball, which used to be. And so that's that is concerning. If I always lean on my own feelings about something. If something is less enjoyable for me, is the rest of the fan base feeling the same way, or the rest of the sport feeling the same way?
Yeah, and I've had the same argument with people about the changes in baseball, which I'll ask you about a little bit later, which is the fact that I think you can acknowledge that something is being successful for the sport. Like, they're going to make a ton of money off this. You're going to get more eyeballs on it. That's understandable. While also acknowledging, the purity of the game is kind of compromised to a certain extent. Like, I think I'm glad Michigan won the championship when they did, because I think with that core, they had guys there that were there 5-6 years of that played together, that came in together, that graduated together. I don't know if we're going to have a college football run like that, where you have that many guys who play for the same 4-year university for that long. And obviously, COVID had something to do with that. But I think with the portal, you immediately saw it. One of Michigan's best DBs goes to Alabama the second they win the national championship. I mean, things have changed so much. I want to transition a little bit to the Tom Izzo era and what's going on. Obviously, their season started last night, and you talk about, that's kind of a good way to kind of piggyback off what you were just talking about, because there have been criticisms or just kind of acknowledgments that he's felt some frustrations about where college basketball is at right now in regards to the portal. Not so much with NIL, but especially with the portal and the fact that, I mean, in college basketball now, you have entire teams that are built through the portal. I mean, Michigan has 12 portal guys on their team right now. Do you feel like, and I hate to say lack of success because they've made the tournament every year that he's like, I've been a sports fan. Like that can't be overlooked, but relative to what he's done, do you feel like the lack of Michigan State dominance, so to speak, in the Big Ten or nationally over the last 4 years or so has more to do with the changing landscape of the sport or more to do with the fact that Cassius really was, the last truly like transcendent player that he had?
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument both a little bit, but I think it's more that because if the sport hadn't changed, because he hasn't lost many guys either. So let's just say the sport hadn't changed, right? I think part of the problem was like that 2018 class that came in with Gabe Brown and Foster Loyer and those guys. That did not wind up being a class that took the next step. So that was it sort of set the program back a little bit. COVID hurt the program in certain ways because there were a couple players that I think in a normal trajectory might have had different paths and different outcomes. A guy like Rocket Watts, who I really thought 2018 was starting to understand some things and might have been a point guard when they needed him. But then not like once Xavier Tillman leaves, there hasn't been anybody else at that caliber that they've replaced him with, portal or not. So if nothing had changed, I don't know how much now. The willingness to go out and replace what you don't have and juggle your roster and keep people. I mean, one thing he has tried to do is keep it so people are still, don't feel like they're being recruited over. They're still valued. One of the ways you don't get people to leave your program is by not, like, if you have a guy who's waited their turn and they're a sophomore and now they're a junior, you don't bring in somebody who's also a junior, who's, or a senior ahead of them. And so I think he's trying to negotiate that in his own head a little bit. I don't think he's like people talk about his unwillingness to use the transfer portal. When he thinks he needs something, he's done it. Tyson Walker, they thought they needed a point guard. Now he wound up being a off the ball guy as much as anything, but they brought him in because they thought they needed a point guard, and that 2018 class hadn't delivered that. When you look at Joey Hauser before it went back when you still had to sit out, really good portal player. He's been willing to do it. And obviously this year they bring in two guys, but they don't go out and spend big money. There's not a $1.2 million center like you might see at a place like Indiana right now or whatever. And I think that is him still trying not to lose guys. And also they're not at the top of NIL. They have good NIL money. They're in the upper tier in the Big Ten, but they're not at the very top. And I don't think he wants to be that program that's like, I think as we move forward, like look at Illinois. Good teams completely flips the roster this year. Now Michigan does that this year, but it's a new coach. I don't think that's going to be. I don't think that's going to be Dusty May's way. My guess is he's trying to build more stability there, and he'll bring in transfers where he needs it. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Illinois, that they've gone the opposite way. They don't care about the consistent culture of this guy. They're gonna flip it, and they're gonna buy transfers and try to win that way, and we'll see if it works. I don't know what the best way long term is, but I do know that Michigan State is probably still better off with Tom Izzo than anybody else they could have in that spot. Yeah, no, and I would agree. And I think so often when you have like the run of tournament success he had is he sustained it way longer than anyone has any right to. I also think that when there is something of a fall off, people look at what's wrong. Whereas to me, when I look at the landscape of the Big Ten right now, I think the coaches and in general, like the conference as a whole, especially with expansion, is probably it's deeper than it's been in a while. I don't know if it's as talented than it was. It's definitely not as it was in the mid 2010s or something. But like Illinois is the program you bring up for about a solid decade. Illinois was kind of a non-factor in this conference. I mean, after the 05 team, they were just kind of there. They had a few tournament teams, but now they're legit contenders. You got Painter finally getting over the hump and recruiting guys. I mean, they have their program. I feel like the conference as a whole has adapted as well. But as far as this current Michigan State team and the current identity of the program, I think you alluded to it with Xavier Tillman. There's kind of two things to me that define really good Michigan State basketball. It's great guard play, and it's at their peak, typically dominating on the glass and having a big man that can just eat up boards. Which of those
things for this current team do you feel like is going to be a bigger issue?
I think they can be fine at guard play. I think they got a lot of guards. I think they're more athletic there. I think they've, do they have a player like Tyson Walker who can just get his? Maybe not. Although on Monday night, Jaden Akins had 23 and looked like he was more of an alpha type player in that role. But they have a lot of guards, a lot of really interesting players. Jace Richardson, the freshman, looks really good. They have. I think they'll have enough shooting. The thought for me though is, will they rebound well enough? Because if you look at the decline of the program, it's almost directly correlated to rebounding. And Jackson Kohler has taken a huge step in that. I think he had 11 or something like that in the last exhibition game. He had 8 last night in limited minutes. He just looks like a sturdy guy who's going to do that well. I think Cohen Carr is somebody who understands now how to use their athleticism. Jaden Akins had might have double last night. I think he did. I think they understand as an emphasis. But what I'm still very curious about is when they play Kansas in a week, or when they play in Maui and they have maybe UConn and then Iowa State or Auburn or North Carolina. Like, what is it going to look like when you face those high caliber teams with other really good bigs? Is this going to be a strength of theirs? Is this going to be something they're solid at? Because if it is, that opens up a lot of possibilities, because that's how they run. That's how a lot of other things work. But they have to get that corrected above all if they're going to get back to where they were pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it's interesting because even I let off with talking about, the fall off after Cassius, but I would argue, they stabilized. It took a minute, but they stabilized the guard play the last several years. I mean, Tyson Walker was one of the best scoring guards in the country. Maybe not a natural point guard, right? But you got Hogard for that. But really, the guy that they haven't been able to replace is the Xavier Tillmans of the world. The guys that can get you 10 boards a game, play great defense. I mean, do you think it's just kind of a string of bad luck? Why do you think it's been almost half a decade now where they've struggled to find that kind of consistent post presence?
Yeah, I mean, you do. I mean, some of it's recruiting. You have to get guys like Marcus Bingham, part of that 2018 class, didn't had moments, but didn't pan out. It's just recruiting. It's who you recruit and how they develop. They haven't been as consistent in landing that person, and then willing to go out and I think the mistake in the year that they didn't go out and get another 5 was before last year, because yes. I think we all knew what Mady Sissoko was, right? And Mady Sissoko was another one. Kid was a 4-star kid, just wasn't that good. And sometimes these guys are a little more raw, but they look athletic. He just, frankly, wasn't big enough to be as raw as he was. Like, he's only 6'8". He just couldn't. And so if you had done it a year ago, the only guy you would have been giving up on and recruiting over would have been Sissoko, because like Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper and even Xavier Booker, freshmen, sophomores, not just feeling like this, you guys aren't ready for this. We're not recruiting over you. We're going to get a guy. Like, you look at Rank Bast at Nebraska, somebody like that. Go get a veteran guy or a one-year player somewhere a year ago would have made a lot more sense. This year, it's interesting what they've done, because Zapala's been okay. And I think that was a pretty good get. Obviously, a bargain bin get, not somebody you spent a lot of money on. But yeah, to me, it's the interior. And then they were a little small on the wing, and they fixed that this year. Like this team now, I am very curious about. I think it'd be fun to cover. I don't know what their ceiling is yet, but they're very different than the last few years, and I think that program needed the turnover.
Yeah, and I also think with Izzo teams, I mean, you don't know the ceiling of Izzo teams sometimes till the second week of March, really. I mean, there's been Izzo teams that have entered the tournament as, okay, first weekend team, and then find themselves in the Final Four. I think with that sport especially, it's almost impossible to get a gauge on it. Real quick, I'm going out of order here, but I want to go back to football for a second and ask about Nick Marsh, because I think Nick Marsh has been, if there's one thing that the Michigan State fan base can universally agree upon, it's that he has had a tremendous breakout freshman season. And probably, I mean, he's already shattered the freshman receiving record, like having missed it, I think 1 or 2 games. He's been remarkably impressive, but we're talking about a freshman, and a freshman on the young side. I mean, they all are, but even more so in his case. Is there any concern? Because I think he's legitimately great. Is there any concern internally about a player of his caliber potentially being poached by other programs in the offseason?
Well, I'm sure people will try. So there should always be you should be on alert for that. The thing that helps in Nick Marsh is he's a legitimate. I mean, he looks like an NFL wideout, and he's got 2 more years before he can go to the NFL. And he was 17 in October. Very young player. I've actually liked this. Ohio State has a 17-year-old freshman. We got to this period where I remember the year that A.J. Hoggard and Hunter Dickinson were like 26-year-old freshmen. I was like, I would like to see your high school, middle school career. Like, how did this happen? These guys cannot be freshmen of the years if you're already 20. It's very different being 17 and 20 or 18 and 20. Yeah. But so I like that we're seeing all these 17-year-olds, even if some of them are reclassifying. But it's a good. I think you should be on alert with that with everybody. That said, I think he comes from a pretty level-headed, stable background, so it's not going to be some emotional decision. He was committed to Mel Tucker through Courtney Hawkins, who was his receivers coach. And then the coaching change happened, sort of recommits to Michigan State. Hawkins is still there. I think Hawkins is a big part of that. He's not a flashy diva type kid, and so I think there are a lot of reasons if you're Michigan State to think that this is the type of player you should have for a couple of years. I also think, if you're trying to sell it to him, number one, they should pay him accordingly NIL wise, and I think they will. But number two, you go somewhere else, you don't know what it's going to be. You've got sort of Aiden Childs on your same track, and whatever you want to say about Aiden Childs. Turnovers and other things and what he'll develop into, and we don't entirely know yet. The guess is that next year will be better than this year. Yes. And the one thing he can do is make NFL throws that a lot of other guys can't make. And if you're a receiver, then that, he may never be a great NFL quarterback because he may never stop turning the ball over. We don't know what's going to happen. But he has an NFL arm. And if you're a receiver who's trying to make it to the NFL, it's a good place for you to be. So I think that's the sales pitch. But in this day and age, like, nothing surprises me. I would never be surprised if anybody left.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth there with the Childs thing, because and yes, there's been many ups and downs, right? But I think one of the smartest things that Jonathan Smith did was pretty much from day one, that's our quarterback. And that is, we saw, with good coaches, we saw it. And you could argue it wasn't until JJ, really, but it was several years before Harbaugh finally had a season in which, guys, this is the quarterback. We're not doing any controversy. We know who's going to be getting these guys the ball. I think having that stability at that position is probably really enticing for somebody like Nick Marsh, probably want to stay at Michigan State. I guess, is in your time covering, football and basketball, I want to focus on football here. Are you surprised by how much the role of freshmen, this might sound strange, the role of freshmen on teams has changed? Because like when I was growing up, when I heard a guy was a freshman, it's like, okay, it's like a prospect. Like he'll be a big deal in 2 or 3 years. And then I was in high school when Manziel won the Heisman as a freshman. And then the next year, Jameis did it as a freshman as well. Now you have guys, you brought up Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, who come on campus as the best player on the field. Like, are you surprised by that kind of evolution that we live in this age where you can come onto a college football gridiron at 17 and be the best player there?
I think they've always existed. I think they're just, maybe it's more frequent, and maybe they come in more skilled and because I remember TJ Duckett when I was, TJ Duckett's about my age when, and when I was coming up through high school, and he was in Kalamazoo and was a huge force as a freshman. Charles Rogers, I think, would have been a force at Michigan State had he been eligible as a freshman. They really needed a receiver, and he had to sit out. It was back in the old days of like Prop 48 or whatever. If you didn't have the grades, you had to sit out a year. So it's a good question. I don't know if there's how much more of it there is, how much more guys are coming in prepared, if there's better weight programs. The other thing you have that you didn't used to have as much as you have a lot more early enrollment. So these guys who are freshmen have done January conditioning and all that stuff. They've done spring football. And it's I remember covering Michigan State the first year I did when Aaron Burbridge was a freshman. And he had, a great game at Indiana, and they were struggling to find a receiver, but then kind of disappeared once defenses took him away. But he arrived in August and wasn't as polished and was just a really good athlete and didn't maybe have he wasn't at Nick Marsh's level, obviously. But yeah, no, it's interesting because I'm the same way. I used to think that, you get a guy, maybe in basketball, it's different. Guys come in right away. But football, usually there's a physical adjustment that doesn't seem to be there, especially at certain positions.
I would also argue, in a weird way, social media and like recruiting hype videos have had kind of a bigger impact than people might think. Where before, if you recruited a guy, you saw him in person maybe a few times and you watch maybe one grainy footage of his high school highlight tape. Now, I mean, guys are, I know this is a different sport, but like Max Clark as a baseball player he's 18, 19 years old. He's a national brand. Like he's already an established guy, internally. I think that a lot of guys do a good job coming out of high school of already having a certain level of built-in hype behind them. But a few more questions, because now you've been through the Izzo era. Obviously, he's been here. He's been the coach my entire lifetime at Michigan State. But with you've gone through D'Antonio, you've gone through Tucker and Smith, and you've also seen a lot of changes just within the athletic department as a whole with the way that they spend their money, upgrades to facilities, stuff like that. What, in your opinion, has changed more since you arrived and started working for the LSJ? Is it Michigan State's approach to athletics, or has it been Graham Couch, the journalist?
It's a good question. I mean, the newspaper industry has changed significantly in the 12 years I've been there, and I'd like to think I've grown. You have those. There are things though that I wrote in 2013, 14, 15, sort of the sweet spot, not just college, but some high school stuff around here that I look back on, boy, that was really good. That was really interesting. And you come into a new gig and you're hungry, and you're trying to develop sources, and it's, so yeah, it's a good question. But Michigan State's approach to athletics has changed substantially as well. Like, and that's through athletic directors. There are 3 of them that I've covered, and Haller is more so than others been very focused on getting not just football and men's basketball to elite levels. Like he wants the overall athletic program to be, he's put a lot of effort into who he's hired in other sports, and you've seen some returns in that in hockey, for example, and with Adam Nightingale and women's basketball, and it's a good question. I don't know comparing one to the other, but both have changed, and in some ways, I am the person I certainly know like when I first came in, Joe Rexrode was like this Michigan State coverage legend guy, and I was able to ride his coattails because we had a relationship with the Free Press, and we did a lot of stuff together. And then Joe left, and that changes that dynamic. And I think my relationship with fans is more intimate than it's ever been. I do a 3-day-a-week podcast where we do a lot of questions and hot takes from people, and we get into them. And I'll take, if people are unhappy with me, I'll take the criticism and deal with it directly. And so I think people know me. So I don't know how different I am. I think my relationship with the people is different. My relationship with Izzo has gone through many iterations. It's 12 years is a long time.
Yeah. And I also think the expansion of kind of the role of a journalist has definitely changed in the sense that it used to be you read article in the paper every day. Now it's expanded to tweets, and it's much more 24/7 than it's ever been.
And even gone away from that. I mean, I've considered leaving Twitter multiple times. Twitter has gone through all this sort of stuff where like Twitter does not drive traffic like it used to. So there was a period of time, 15, 16, 17, where like Twitter, you tweet something, you'd see a spike. I would say Twitter is less than 10% of what produces an audience for a column these days. And so I probably put too much time into it for what it actually gives out of it. But it's like anybody, it's an addiction. So can I actually, I'd be healthier without it. I know that. So can I actually leave it? I don't actually know.
Yeah. Last question, because I've always enjoyed going back to my time with Jack, your takes on baseball, because I know you're a baseball fan, but like you're not a baseball purist, which I wouldn't call myself that either, surprisingly. And this might be the bad word to use on this day. I'd call myself a progressive baseball fan, where like I also get bored with 5-hour games. Like I still like, I love the game and everything, but I'm accepting of rule changes and stuff like that. With the game kind of evolving the way it has with pitch clock and shorter games and, the runner on second rule, do you feel as a fan like baseball is in a better place than it was, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, the pitch clock to me has made watching baseball, something I do more frequently. Now, I am still very much, though, unlike like football, I'll watch the Sunday night game. And I used to watch maybe the Sunday night baseball game this summer, and occasionally I'll have it on in the background. But I watch a lot of Tigers games, or at least have them on while I'm working. I don't watch a lot of other baseball. Now, some of that's because there isn't the same national deal, right? The Tigers are what I get. But yeah, no, it's in a better place. I mean, it's hard to say that as somebody who's followed the Tigers, because like 10 years ago they were relevant and that was more fun, and then they went through this awful period of time. But yeah, it seems like the sport is found some footing that it had lost, and I don't know that it ever gets it becomes the young hip sport, but that doesn't matter as long as people age into it and like it. If people like it enough, and then it becomes something. As long as you have enough of the population that's into it, and I still think it's an unbelievable sport to be at a game, as good as anything there is. I still think there is a pacing to it that I enjoy. Like, one of the things about being a sports fan of all sorts of different types of sports is they are different, and you like them for different reasons, and you're ready when the new season begins in certain ways. I can't wait for basketball season every year, for football season every year, for baseball season every year. I love soccer these days. I've gotten wildly into Premier League soccer, some sort of midlife crisis. But but they're all different, and they give me different joys. And baseball is definitely and you're talking to me right after the Tigers just had a run that was just as much fun as I've had following them in years and years and years and years and years.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it, obviously, with the team being, finally relevant again. But even before that, no, I was completely with you. I mean, the pitch clock to me is as significant a rule change as we've seen in sports since the shot clock, like legitimately. I mean, you're getting playoff games that are over in less than 3 hours, whereas legitimately there were times 9-inning games. You're talking midnight, 12:30 before you're even, the game's even finished. And to kind of counter that, because you brought up college football earlier, I find the viewing experience of being at a baseball game to be great. I find the viewing experience of being at a college football game, especially a big game like some of the ones that I've been to recently, insufferable is probably too strong a word, but with the Fox commercial breaks and with all that stuff, and at least with baseball, and this is short attention span theater, there's stuff going on around the ballpark in between innings and stuff like that. When you just got to kind of watch, the guy would stand there with the Fox clock countdown for 4 minutes after, a punt and a 3-and-out. That to me is a less enjoyable experience than it's ever been.
Yes, in baseball, the breaks have always been built into the sport, right? The inning ends, and so now we have a break. It's sort of where we're sort of built to understand it. Football has gotten worse and worse, and I do need to. I have not been to a football game that I have not covered in quite a while, and probably need to do it because, when I'm covering a game, I'm in my own world of work, and like I said earlier, it helps me to have the breaks at some time, especially in the second half. But I can't imagine, like when I'm just watching on TV, it's not great, and I can't imagine being there. And I think that's something. I know television is everything now, and I know that revenue, there's that balance, but the gate receipt still matters. And if you're somebody who, like it's just not that fun, I'd rather be watching on TV. To me, they really have to work on making sure the experience at the stadium is as good as anything, because and maybe it's a little different than the at-home experience, but you got to get something there that you can't get at home, and I don't know what that is, and I'm amazed by the lack of creativity in advertising with football. Like it is, to me, there should be ways to develop that advertising revenue, and other than just here's a 4-minute commercial every 5 minutes, like that is not. There's got to be a way to say, hey, this next, half quarter, next 2 drives are, commercial or sponsored without commercial interruption by this company. And you do some thing around them and everything's about them. And you know who's going to be grateful for that? The people who don't have a commercial interruption. Right. I'm more likely to buy that product. I don't know. So I guess there's got to be more creativity in how it's packaged.
I would agree. I mean, the one game that I could compare it to is I was at Michigan, Ohio State last year, and I remember saying to myself, the only reason why this was worth it was because they won. If they would have lost, it's going to be miserable here. And it's like, I feel like that's a tough precedent to send where you're kind of, you're really rolling the dice. But look, I know you got to get out of here, man. You've been in my corner just as somebody who's following my content for a long time, but you've been a friend as well during a whole lot of the nonsense that I continually throw out there. But you're the man. You are a staple here now of Lansing and Michigan State sports. It will be weird the day that you're not a part of this, where your articles aren't showing up and your tweets aren't showing up. So thank you on a personal level for doing the show and being kind, and obviously for the job that you've done and will continue to do. Thanks for being on the show, man. Yeah,
and anytime anybody cancels on you, I can be that guest. So
yes,
I'll be your no-show guest. Graham's here again. Somebody didn't show. That's
you got
great.
it. And we will have you on again at some point in the future. So I appreciate it, buddy.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Yep. Bye. Always a good time with Graham. Smart guy. I mean, he's always been a tremendous writer, and I think he's always kind of seen things pretty fairly. And he's one of those guys who's been around media for so long, and he knows this rivalry very well, and he knows this community very well. So you could definitely continue to read his articles for Lansing State Journal, and of course listen to Couch in the Roof, the show that he does, which is available. I was checking his Twitter page today. I'll link to his social medias down below. You can find all the links to everything there. Always appreciate him having on. Well, we'll have him on again at some point. I do like the idea of having repeat guests, and we will have some repeat guests here in the future. No word yet on who next week's guest is going to be. I have a hunch, but I don't want to announce it quite yet because we had a no-show a few weeks ago, and the last thing I want is to promote something that then doesn't happen. All right, let's wrap this thing up. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. The links to all my content can be found in the link tree down below. And of course, CastellaniContent.com, the brand new sexy, it has that fresh new website smell. CastellaniContent.com, where you can find all the content that I do archived just for you. I've gotten some questions about this. I am going to try. I may fail, but I am going to try to find a way to archive and go back through and find the Tiger videos that I've done over the last several seasons. Now we're talking 8 years worth. That's a whole lot of searching. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm going to workshop it. I'm going to see what's best. I've had some people say just start with the current stuff you do. I'm not sure, but the website is a work in progress. If you see something that you don't like, it will get fixed. We're still in the early stages of this. This independent monetization, independent content creation is a new thing for me. So a lot of, there's a lot of cracks in the armor, but a huge reason why the armor is on in the first place is because of our producer, Austin Sisler, who continues to do a wonderful job. So you can make sure to follow him on all platforms as well. I'd call him the Robin to my Batman, but he's more like the Kato to my Green Hornet, where he does like way cooler stuff. I'm just kind of there. But thank you guys very much. We will be back next week with another episode. Shout out Graham Couch. If you're listening to this, watching this right now, I hope you went out and voted, because you know what? If you vote and then your person loses, that means you can complain. You can't complain if you don't vote. So little wise wisdom from a guy who is not so wise, Chris Castellani. All right. Love you guys. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.